Hello friends, welcome to a new episode of Drishti IAS Editorial Analysis. In this editorial analysis, we do three things. First of all, we link the editorial to the UPSC syllabus. Secondly, we try to understand the key points mentioned in the editorial. And thirdly, if any key concepts have come in the editorial and are important from exam point of view, we also discuss that. So let us begin today's editorial analysis. We have taken today's editorial from Hindustan Times and it has appeared on 11th of June. The title of the editorial is Assam, Oil India Limited, Blowout, Fire, the polluter must pay. And it deals with the blowout and the subsequent fire in the natural gas well in Assam being operated by Oil India Limited. And the editorial says that the drilling clearance given to the company now must be reviewed, the quantum of damage must be assessed, and the responsibility for this environmental disaster must be fixed. So now let us look at its linkage with the syllabus. So we can see that it links directly with GS paper 3, where we have biodiversity, environment and disaster management. Because this accident has happened very near to a national park, so it has had very serious impact on the environment and the wild animals. So not only this is a man-made disaster, but it has also led to serious consequences for the environment and the biodiversity in the place. So after establishing this linkage with the syllabus, now let us look at the key points of the editorial. So before moving on to the key points of the editorial, let us look at how this accident actually happened. So this is the scene of the natural gas well which is on fire after the blowout. And this fire started after 13 days of the blowout accident. Now let us look at the map of Assam and see where it is located. So here we have the map of Assam and we can see that Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, near which this natural gas well of Oil India Limited is located, is here. And this area is basically known as Upper Assam. So Oil India Limited has been extracting natural gas from this well since 2006. And recently on 11th of May 2020, it got permission to drill further 7 new wells in the same area, and this area was very near to the Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, and the distance between the natural gas well where this blowout and subsequent fire has taken place is only about 1 kilometer, and the eco-sensitive zone which is outside the national park, that is just 300 meters away from the site where this accident has happened. So it has caused great damage to the biodiversity and the animals residing in the national park. Also, there is a famous wetland called Maguri Motapung near this natural gas well which has now caught fire, and it has led to the death of some endangered animals like the Gangetic dolphin whose carcass has been found in the wetland. So now let us look at how this accident actually happened. So basically on 27th of May, a blowout happened in the natural gas well. And what is a blowout? It is a sudden uncontrolled release of gas or oil. Generally in every natural gas well, we have a system called a blowout preventer. This blowout preventer prevents any such accident. But because this well was undergoing servicing, so this blowout preventer had been taken out. And all of a sudden this blowout happened. And this continued for 13 days. In the meantime, the Oil India Limited, which is operator of the well, it brought in experts from Singapore also to stop this blowout. But before they could reach the site, the gas well caught fire on 9th of June. And the name of this well is Bagjan 5 well, and it is located in the Tinsukia district near Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. And it is just 1 kilometer away from the core area of this national park, and just 300 meters away from the eco-sensitive zone outside the national park. And another famous wetland called Maguri Motapung wetland is also nearby. And this wetland is famous for the Gangetic dolphins and Hollock gibbons. And it also houses a variety of birds. Now this natural gas well was originally drilled in 2006, and since then it has been producing 80,000 standard cubic meters per day of natural gas. And natural gas, we should know, is basically methane, CH4. So this natural gas was being produced through this natural gas well, and the normal production was around 80,000 standard cubic meters per day and at a pressure of 2,700 pounds per square inch. But after this blowout, the current discharges around 90,000 standard cubic meters per day and the pressure has gone up. It is now 4,200 pounds per square inch. So you can see that it is a totally uncontrolled blowout, and now it has also caught fire. And the reason behind this is that in these natural gas wells, sometimes the pressure balance gets disturbed, leading to kicks or changes in the pressure. And these kicks have to be controlled in time, otherwise it can turn out into a sudden blowout, which actually happened in this case. To get an idea of what this blowout is like, one can just imagine 1 million pressure cookers releasing steam in an uncontrolled manner. So that kind of gas is being released. And what is the reason for this blowout? So the reasons can be many. If there is lack of attention while doing the servicing, that could be one reason. Poor workmanship of the natural gas well, that can be another. Due to bad maintenance, sometimes these blowouts happen. Sometimes these wells and the equipment becomes really old, and if it is not getting maintained properly, then also this can happen. It can also happen due to sabotage, and sometimes only due to geological factors. This can also happen. Now let us see how the blowout is controlled. So basically controlling a blowout depends on the size of the reservoir and the pressure at which the gas is flowing out. And the techniques that are used are, sometimes we just carry out a blast which will lead to lack of oxygen, and natural gas will also be utilized in that. So the fire will die out. Another technique is to drill another well nearby and connect it to the blowout well so that the gas gets diverted from the well which is on fire to this new well and the fire dies out. And the third technique is to put a new blowout preventer and cap the well. Now the experts are saying that it will take at least 4 weeks to put down the fire in this well. And because of this well catching fire, 1610 families with around 3000 people have been evacuated to the relief camps. So this was all about the incident that has happened. Now let us look at the key points of the editorial. So the editorial talks about this blowout in a gas well in Assam, which happened on 27th of May. And for 13 days, the blowout could not be stopped. And on 9th of June, the well also caught fire. So the incident got even bigger. And the name of this natural gas well is Bagjan, and it is located in Tinsukia district of Assam. And another important fact from prelims point of view is that it is located near the Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, and an important wetland is also nearby, which is Maguri Motapong wetland. And this wetland is famous for two endangered species. One is Gangetic dolphin, which is also the national aquatic animal of India, and the other endangered animal which is found here is the Pollock gibbons, which is a primate. So the editorial talks about the twin mishaps. One was the blowout that happened in the well and subsequent fire. And it says that this points to the pitfalls of allowing hazardous industries in ecologically sensitive areas, which ideally should not be done. But there is a trade-off between protecting the environment, conserving the environment, and also the developmental needs. So during this lockdown, that is on May 11th, All India Limited received clearance for further drilling in Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. And the well which has caught fire was drilled by All India Limited in 2006. But through this permission on May 11th, it was allowed to drill another 7 wells in nearby areas. And this well which caught fire was undergoing maintenance when this accident happened. So the editorial says that this order which was given to carry out drilling of 7 new wells in this area which is ecologically sensitive, this order must now be reviewed, that how it was allowed. And there should also be proper assessment of the system failures that have led to this accident, and accountability must be fixed. Plus, assessment should also be done of the extent of damage to environment and livelihoods of the people who have been affected by this natural gas well catching fire. The editorial then talks about the question of compensation which should be given in case of such disasters which are man-made. Now the company which is responsible for this is the oil PSU, which is Oil India Limited, and editorial says that it could be held liable under the absolute liability principle. This will look in the key concept section. In brief, it means that the company cannot say that this has happened due to negligence. It is solely responsible for the accident and the full liability is on it to compensate the victims. But the editorial also makes this point that in India, the compensation and relief process is very long drawn. It takes long time and sometimes it also ends up in litigation, which also delays the compensation to be received by the affected parties. And it also cites a recent report on the Environment Relief Fund, which showcases three problems. The first problem is the amount awarded by NGT, which is the National Green Tribunal, for such accidents is not credited to this account, which is Environment Relief Fund, and many compensation orders which have been issued are still pending in the Supreme Court. So that is also a problem. And thirdly, there is no tracking of implementation of the compensation process, neither by the National Green Tribunal nor by the government. So these three issues leave the affected parties at total mercy of the wrongdoer or the company which has actually caused the accident or the environmental disaster. And the editorial says that these flaws need to be fixed to uphold the polluter pays principle and also to provide timely relief to the affected parties, which is very critical, especially in such cases where environment has been harmed. So this was all in the key points of the editorial. Now let us look at the key concepts. So first of all, let us see the Environment Relief Fund. Now this was established under the Public Liability Insurance Act 1991 for immediate relief to persons affected by accidents occurring while handling the notified hazardous substances. And the Environment Relief Fund was first notified in November 2008. And it consists of compensation awarded by the National Green Tribunal for damage to the environment under Section 24 of the NGT Act 2010. And another thing to note here is till March 2019, the fund has grown from Rs 283 crores to Rs 810 crores. But as we saw in the editorial, there are some issues with this Environment Relief Fund. The compensation that is being awarded by NGT, that is not being credited to this Environment Relief Fund. The cases are pending in the Supreme Court for compensation and there is no follow-up process, not by NGT, not by the government. So which leaves the affected parties high and dry. Second important concept is polluter pays principle. Now it is a commonly accepted practice that those who produce pollution should also bear the cost of managing it to prevent damage to human health or to the environment. So for example, a factory that produces a potentially poisonous substance as a byproduct of its activities is usually held responsible for its safe disposal. And polluter pays principle is based on the idea of sustainable development and it is part of the 1992 Rio Declaration which gives broader principles to guide sustainable development worldwide. So this is very important concept and very useful for quoting in any essay or in your mains answer writing. Now let us look at the doctrine of absolute liability. What does this mean? So under absolute liability principle, a party or a company in a hazardous industry cannot claim any exemption. It has to mandatorily pay compensation whether or not the disaster was caused by its negligence. So this is very important and this is a game changer principle for any environmental disasters which happen due to the negligence by companies. So they cannot claim any exemption. They have to mandatorily pay the compensation. And the NGT Act of 2010 incorporates the absolute liability principle. And Section 17 of the Act mandates that the tribunal should apply the absolute liability principle even if the disaster caused is an accident. So there is simply no excuse. And a hazardous enterprise is liable even if the disaster is an accident and not caused by the negligence of the company. So this is a very strict law and strict doctrine. But the problem here is that it is not applied uniformly. Even in the recent styrene gas leak which happened in Telangana, this absolute liability principle or doctrine was not applied initially. Later on, some lawyers raised this point that absolute liability principle should be applied and the company must pay compensation whether or not it was an accident. Let us also have a look at this famous case, MC Mehta versus Union of India 1987. And in this, the Supreme Court found strict liability principle inadequate to protect citizens' rights and replaced it with the absolute liability principle. So from this case only, this absolute liability principle has come into practice. And this judgment had come in the oleum gas leak case of Delhi in 1986. And this is a very important case and it can be asked in prelims also. So you should be knowing about this MC Mehta versus Union of India 1987 case, and the absolute liability principle has come out of it. And in this case, the court found that strict liability, which was evolved in an English case called Rylands versus Fletcher 1868, it provided companies with several exemptions from assuming liability. But in absolute liability, no defense or exemptions is allowed, and it is part of Article 21, right to life. And in this case, the court wanted corporations to be made fully liable for future undeserved suffering of innocent citizens, and it held that a hazardous enterprise has an absolute non-delegable due to the community. So in this case, this absolute liability principle came into existence. And this is very important principle for any environmental disaster. After this, let us look at the kind of questions that can be asked in prelims and mains. So in prelims, one can be asked about the location of this natural gas fire, where it has happened. So it has happened in Assam near this Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. So this national park and the wetland near which it has happened. So you should be knowing about their name and location. The endangered species that are found in this national park and this wetland, that also you should be knowing. Then you should be knowing about the natural gas. What is it? So it is essentially methane and other components are there. And also you should be knowing about condensate, which is a hydrocarbon liquid stream separated from natural gas, and it consists of higher molecular weight hydrocarbons that exist in the reservoir as constituents of natural gas, but which are recovered as liquids. So this is always recovered as liquid in the natural gas wells. And also one should be knowing about blowout. So this is when the gas releases suddenly and which is uncontrolled release of gas. So that is a blowout situation. And the unit in which natural gas is measured, so it is standard cubic meters. And the pricing of natural gas, this also is important. It happens in British thermal units. So gas is always priced in British thermal units, which is MMBTU is million British thermal units, and SCMD is the unit for measuring the volume of the gas. So it is million standard cubic meters per day. Now in mains, the kind of questions can be asked on sustainable development. About polluter pays principle you should be knowing and be clear. Question can also be asked on eco-sensitive zones and permission for hazardous industries, whether it should be given or not, what kind of precautions should be taken. And a question can also come on the absolute liability principle, that in which case it was formulated by the Supreme Court, and what are the challenges in enforcing this. So these are the kind of questions about which you should be prepared. So this was all in today's editorial analysis. We'll see you next time with another editorial. Thank you.